So unless you've been living under a rock, you know that AI companies have been hoovering up all the silicon and all the RAM. And it's causing a massive hardware squeeze. And it's not that the AI companies are buying up consumer-grade hardware. It's the fact that the same fabs that create the hardware for AI companies also creates the hardware for consumers. And the AI demand is so high that they're basically putting the actual consumers on the back burner right now because of all the money they're making. Because when the sun's shining, you've got to make hay. And right now, the biggest piece of hardware to get hit is RAM, because the AI companies are buying up all the HEM RAM. Now, the same fabs, yet again, that create the HEM RAM also create the DDR5 RAM. And consequently, they also make all of the flash memory for things like the Samsung T7 or the Extreme Disk Pro SSD as well. And you would think, hey, let's just either have more companies making RAM or let's just make more RAM itself. The problem is there's only 3 companies, and those 3 companies have always been consumer facing, so they can't just ramp up production because creating these modules is very complicated and it takes engineers to do it. The 3 companies that control all of the RAM production in the world are SK Hynix, Micron, which is US based, and Samsung. And the funny part about that is that Samsung literally said, because of these RAM shortages, all of our appliances are going to go up, because apparently when you make the RAM, you don't get to dictate where it goes. You're probably saying this is a PC hardware issue. This has nothing to do with me as a cinematographer or a consumer. You're wrong. And here's why. Because every camera has RAM in it. I should say every modern mirrorless consumer grade camera has more RAM in it. We'll put it that way. So if you weren't aware, the majority of cameras have generally 2 to 4 gigabytes of RAM in them internally. 2 gigabytes is usually for entry-level cameras, whereas 4 gigabytes are more professional cameras like the A1 II. That RAM is responsible for a lot of things. And that RAM has more to do with your camera than you realize, because when you're looking at a screen on your camera, whether it's the EVF or the LCD screen on the back, that is from RAM. The noise reduction in your camera, that is RAM. The eye and face detect autofocus, that is RAM. One of the other things it controls too is how many frames per second you can shoot when doing stills or even in video. But these burst modes on raw photos are heavily influenced by how much onboard RAM and how fast it is. So when we see cameras like the A7 IV, which is relatively consumer grade, and it's able to shoot 30 burst in electronic shutter, we see the Canon EOS 6 Mark III with 40 frames per second, this heavily relies on RAM. And even beyond that, you have silicon in your camera as well. The CMOS sensor is based upon silicon, similar to how CPUs are. So with the massive hardware squeeze that is already hitting and going to continue to hit and obliterate the PC marketplace, there's going to be a trickle-down effect now. It's not just going to be PCs. It's going to be washers, dryers, refrigerators, toaster ovens, and cameras. Because of how hard it is to get RAM right now, because the AI companies have all the fabs backed up with their orders. And yet again, the AI companies aren't using consumer-grade hardware. They're using their own, but all the fabs that make consumer-grade hardware also make the AI corporate-level hardware, and they're being bombarded by all the AI companies in this arms race, which then screws the consumer. So when we're talking about all the amazing cameras that have come out the past couple of years, like the Pixis 6K, the Pixis 12K, the Ursa 12K, the Ursa 17K, the Nikon ZR, the A7 IV, the Canon R6 Mark III, all these cameras, even the Lumix S1 II, are going to start getting affected by pricing because all the RAM companies are telling all the other companies to come back to renegotiate their long-term RAM contracts, as if the tariffs weren't bad enough. Now, if you're looking in the right places, you can even start to see some of the costs going up. My Sony a7S III, which is the least demand alpha camera, honestly, at this point, because you have the FX3, that's $4,000 selling brand new now. And even more so, we're starting to see other pieces of PC hardware start to go up. In the beginning, it was just GPUs during the pandemic because people figured out that they could use GPUs to Bitcoin mine. And all of a sudden, there was a massive hardware squeeze for GPUs. And then NVIDIA said, oh my God, people are willing to pay more money. Why don't we just keep the supply squeezed all the time? And that's been the status quo. But now, all the hardware is going up because of the massive demand from AI companies. GPUs are still squeezed very heavily. However, with RAM, I built a computer about 6 months ago, sitting right on the desk behind me. I got DDR5 64 gigabytes, G Skills, X5 flares. I paid $220 and I thought that was expensive at the time. Now that same kit is worth basically $900, making it single-handedly the best investment I've ever made. And if you hop on camel.com, you can start to see that some of these flash memory modules like the NVMe sticks, the 990 Pro 2 terabyte is going up. The 4 terabyte skyrocketed in price, but the 2 terabyte, which is generally what people go for, 6 months ago was like $175. Now it's gone up to about $230. So we can see that NVMe drives are starting to go up, similar to how RAM happened. And if it happens in the same suit, basically RAM shot up over a matter of 3 months out of nowhere. It was like it went up 100%, then it went up 300%, then it was up another 100%. And all of a sudden, it cost a lot of money to buy sticks of RAM. And I think that's what we're seeing with NVMEs right now. The process might be a little bit slower. I don't know. But I do know that the GPU shortage is going to continue because NVIDIA announced that they are doing 40% less production on their 50 series, which is insane because these GPUs are already squeezed. I think they only had 3 months worth of like normal pricing. To give you an idea of what to expect with cameras, we basically have these massive shortages because of semiconductors and because of RAM with GPUs. An RTX 5090, which is the flagship, already shot up to an MSRP of $2,000, which is absurd compared to all the previous series. And, you know, NVIDIA was happy to collect it, especially after the pandemic, and they wanted more money than the 4090. You can't find one of these graphics cards for $2,000. They're all $3,000 or more now. And there's tons of rumors going around the world of hardware. I'm sure a lot of them aren't true, but, you know, the 5090 could potentially go up to being $5,000 MSRP, which probably isn't going to happen, but it's probably going to hover around $3,500 to $4,000 for a 5090 if the squeeze continues down this trend. And I've already said that Samsung has already announced that all of their appliances are going to cost more money, and everything that you use basically uses flash memory in some way, shape, or form, meaning RAM sticks. And all those appliances are going to get really, really expensive until we find a way to either bring fab production to America in full sale, or one of our allies like South Korea or Japan massively increases their factories. I think SK Hynix says that they're setting up like 2 new fabs, but I don't know. That's not my world. I know cameras. The worst part about it is there's only 3 companies that create RAM, so it's not technically a monopoly because apparently 3 is enough competition, and being okay with the status quo was fine. And there's no laws technically against an oligopoly, which is what this is. They got caught multiple years ago basically running the RAM industry like a cartel. The loophole they found is that if they do the pricing out in person, it's technically not price fixing because they didn't all talk to each other. One person said they were going to do something, and the rest followed suit. What the fuck is even that? So I guess what I'm trying to tell you is the fact that cameras are probably going to get expensive. If you're planning on buying a camera, probably do it sooner than later, because we're going to start to see prices go up. We're going to see shortage squeezes happen. And basically the people that have cameras are going to continue to get work. And as those cameras break and people get less work, it's going to be harder and harder to get cameras. Yet again, this is all speculation. I'm not a fortune teller, but based upon what we're seeing in all the other industries with this kind of hardware, that's what's happening. So why should we expect anything differently to happen to cameras? So if you're planning on buying a camera, do it sooner than later. That's the best advice I can give you right now. If you're not, be happy with what you have and keep creating and be content. That's all I got to say. I'll see you in the next one.